everybody, and welcome to your bonus class on the crystals of the Bible. I am so excited to be bringing you this content. You know, a lot of people were raised Christian, just as I was, or, you know, worked with the Old Testament, were raised Jewish, and so we have such an appreciation for the Bible and for its ancient wisdom. And yet, for many of us, we didn't really know that crystals were in the Bible. Did you know? Did you know that crystals were used for magical purposes in the Bible? It's kind of inspirational and fun to find this out. So this class is really about teaching you about the 12 most important crystals in the Christian Bible. And they were mentioned in Exodus in the Old Testament, and they were part of what was called the Hoshen, or the breastplate of Aaron, who was the high priest. Aaron was the brother of Moses, and so it was a really interesting story if you sort of trace the narrative. All of this will be available, by the way. It's one of the dedicated chapters in my brand new book called Crystal Legends, Lore, and Myths, which is coming out from Fairwinds Press late 2018, early 2019. So in that chapter, you'll get even more information. But I wanted to give you sort of an overview of these 12 crystals. And I want to share with you that what's fascinating about this study, and what I was really excited about, what we were able to do at Sage Goddess, is we made a companion gemstone set for this lesson that includes chrysolite, or chrysoberyl, which is one of the most rare stones of the biblical stones. You really don't find it anymore. It's only mined currently in Brazil, and there are only very tiny pockets of it. In fact, in our travels to find chrysolite for your set, this is the size of crystal we're able to find. Now, here's what you need to know. This little magical piece of heaven right here, this little rare crystal that was used in biblical times, this is truly it, is actually one facet of this. This is how a natural chrysolite crystal grows. Isn't that beautiful? Perfect six-pointed star, absolutely sacred. You know, one of the things I was thinking is, wouldn't this make a beautiful ring? Can you imagine a 2 or 3 carat natural chrysolite stone set into 14 karat gold? Like, what a beautiful piece of jewelry that would be. As I get older, I find that I still appreciate the precious gemstones, but I have an even deeper appreciation for the semi-precious, because especially when they're in beautiful natural crystal form, there's almost something, you know, intriguing and mystical and deeply historical, very mysterious about some of the crystals on this list. So I hope you're excited, and I hope you're ready. So we're going to go over the 12 crystals of the Bible tonight, which are, again, the 12 crystals in Aaron's breastplate. I want to try to explain to you what Aaron's breastplate was. And as I try to explain this to you, first of all, it's a difficult concept to explain. We only have what the Bible says to teach us how this breastplate worked. And because it was a metaphysical tool, when I explain it to you, you're going to be like, that's magic. It is a case where crystals were used for what I would consider to be a metaphysical purpose, meaning beyond what your 5 senses can experience. That to me is what metaphysics is. Metaphysics is using your senses outside of your traditional Muggle 3D 5 basic senses. And so the breastplate was a gold plate that had 12 stones in 4 rows, okay, 3, 6, 9, 12. And it was worn, it was attached over the shoulders of Aaron, and on the top of his shoulders, so there was 1 stone for each of the 12 tribes of Israel, okay? And then on Aaron's shoulders, he had 2 onyx, think of them as palm stones, okay? And on one shoulder, he had the 6 names, and on the other shoulder, he had the other 6 names. And so the 12 names were holding the 12 stones. And the idea, the concept was that when Aaron wore this breastplate, that he was able to activate 2 energy streams, and I'm gonna spell them and pronounce them for you. The Urim, U-R-I-M, and the Thummim, okay, T-H-U-M-M-I-M. These energy streams are thought to be the light and truth of God, okay? And so when Aaron wore the breastplate, he activated the Urim and the Thummim, and he spoke and channeled the divine light and truth of God. It's pretty profound, isn't it? That crystals were used for that purpose. And as the biblical legend goes, when Aaron would put on this breastplate and channel the Urim and the Thummim, the light and the truth of God, that the crystals would glow. Can you imagine? This is what the Bible says, the crystals would glow. And so there are many different artistic representations and renderings of the Hoshen. If you want to see what that looks like, and it's spelled Hoshen. If you want to Google that, you can look up pictures of what Aaron looked like wearing the sacred breastplate. I'm going to teach you tonight about what I believe, based on my research, are the original 12 stones, and then what we gave you, which are still, all of your stones in your set are stones that were available and used during biblical times, all 12. But the one thing that we really struggle with, those of us who are scholars and historians trying to understand the crystals of the Bible, is that there are two main issues. And I wrote about this in the book too. One is our ancestors were not really great at identifying stones. Okay? They called all blue stones lapis. They called every color of topaz, topaz. They called every color of beryl, beryl, right? And so in some cases you don't know, was it white beryl or was it green beryl? Was it green jasper or was it white jasper? Was it white onyx or was it green onyx? And so there are conflicting stories. For the most part, what we know is that the breastplate was largely made up of stones that represented the fire element, because fire was thought to be the primary element through which God's energy was expressed. Very interesting, right? And also because the breastplate was largely said to contain white, green, and red stones. And as you can see in your set, most of your stones do sort of fall into that red, orange, peachy, green, clear. The only ones that really don't in your set are your lapis, which I'll talk to you about what some of the other possibilities are that it could have been used for. And then we know for sure that amethyst was in the breastplate. There's no debate about it. Amethyst was the crystal referred to as Aklama. That's one of the tribes. And we know there was no replacement. There was no substitution for amethyst. So there may have been substitutions for other crystals, but not for amethyst, which I think is very interesting. Amethyst was the absolute stone in biblical times and remains today the stone associated with Aklama. So shall we begin? Okay. So the first stone of the breastplate, Odem, the first tribe, is carnelian. And this is your carnelian right here. And so what I want to tell you about Odem, and by the way, the optional stone that it could have been back in ancient times is sardonyx. There was a very bright red-orange color of sardonyx in biblical times. And so it is possible that the Odem stone could have been sardonyx. But most accounts claim it was carnelian, and I also believe, based on all of my research, that it probably was carnelian too. Why was carnelian in the breastplate of Aaron? So carnelian, biblically and historically, was considered to be a power stone. Our ancient ancestors thought it was associated with Mars, which is a planet of war and action and activity, sort of the force of will. And so it was thought to be a very powerful stone. Carnelian was oftentimes associated with male and masculine energy. And the other reason our ancestors loved it, and it was chosen for the breastplate of Aaron, is that it was highly engravable. All the way back to ancient Sumeria, cylinder seals and stamps with people's names on them, because it was a really big deal in ancient times. If you had money in ancient times and biblical times, the way people would know that is your name would be imprinted on something permanent. A seal would be imprinted with your last name. You would have a signet ring, usually worn on your forefinger with your crest or your name or some identifying thing about you that would stand the test of time and live beyond your death. That was the goal of every ancient person, was to have their name engraved in stone. And so carnelian was the first stone in the breastplate. We really do believe it was carnelian, and because it's highly engravable, it is easy to work with. Carnelian represents power. It always has. It represents force of will. It represents creative passion too, and it represents the vehicle. This is the stone that carries. It's the vehicle for the Spirit of God, as the Urim and the Thummim are being translated. And by the way, I asked the question. I did a lot of research. How did the breastplate activate these energy streams? Right. So there's different stories. Some stories say that just by placing the breastplate on, that Aaron's own energy was able to connect with those energy streams and activate it, and then the crystals would light up. Some say that Aaron actually put something inside of the breastplate once he put it over his shoulders, and that whatever he placed inside of that. May have been, some people say it was the tetragrammaton, that it was a visual representation of the energy of God. The tetragrammaton is considered to be one of the, original representation symbols of God's energy. And so some people say that Aaron placed the tetragrammaton inside of the breastplate. I think that it was just an energetic exercise. I think when we try to say that Aaron put something inside of it, that's almost a very 3D perspective. I think if it's true that God's energy worked through the breastplate, he wouldn't have needed Aaron to put anything inside of it to activate it. Do you know what I mean? So I tend to go with that interpretation. The second crystal in the Bible is blue topaz. Blue topaz. Okay. This we know for sure true. The other option would have been clear topaz. We know for sure that Pitdah, P-I-T-D-A-H, the second stone in the breastplate of Aaron, was topaz for sure. Whether it was clear white topaz or blue topaz, we're not exactly sure. But we know for sure that in biblical times, topaz was thought to be a talisman that represented luck and protection. It also brought clarity, peace, and emotional healing. And so as it sat on the breastplate next to the sardonyx, which was all about action and activity, this stone represented the clarity that God's light and truth could bring. If you really think about it that way, like if you want to connect to the energy of these stones, try, as I'm describing them to you, try thinking about that. How could you work with carnelian to activate the creative energy that God's force inspires? In other words, what is God, or however you think of God? I'm saying God because we're talking about the Christian Bible, but you know me, right? God shows up in the way that you'll understand and recognize most easily. And so if you're going to activate these energy streams, if you're going to invite God's presence into your life more fully, how would that activate your creative potential? How would that bring you additional energy? And then the question to ask with topaz is, would that bring you greater clarity to work with God's light and God's truth? I love topaz so much. In ancient times, as you'll read in the book, topaz was carried by soldiers, especially in Greece and Rome, because it was thought that if you carried topaz or you had it in your breastplate, that you would be invisible to anyone who would do you harm. And even to this day, in metaphysical circles, we think of topaz as being an invisibility stone, or it makes you less accessible to those who would do you harm. The next stone is chrysoprase. Chrysoprase looks like this. That's just some juicy, gemmy heart medicine right there. Chrysoprase is one of the most powerful heart chakra stones you can work with. And I love the idea that it was in the breastplate of Aaron. I love the idea that God's energy works through such a powerful love stone. The other options, by the way, biblically, stones that could have been available and may have been mistaken for chrysoprase would have been emerald. I don't have a piece here to show you, but you know what emerald looks like. It may have been emerald. We don't think so. But it could have been. And it could also have been green garnet. That's just one other options of crystals that were available in biblical times. Most accounts claim that Barakath, which is the third stone in the breastplate, was in fact chrysoprase. And that it was there because it represented God's true love, God's heart-opening capacity. God can awaken you, at least, according to Christians, God can awaken you to a new level of compassion for others and your own ability to heal from past heartache and past trauma. And so that's what chrysoprase represents. The next stone in the breastplate, number 4, is almandine garnet. And this represents the tribe Nophek. The other option for this stone that would have been available, but it's less likely, is carbuncle. It was also referred to as anthrax, which is a bright red mineral. In fact, there was a disease that was named anthrax years later, centuries later, right? And the reason is that anthrax caused bleeding, and so the color red is associated with anthrax. This is garnet, almandine garnet, which we believe was the 4th stone in Aaron's breastplate. It activates the root chakra. In ancient times, garnet was thought to be lit from within by God. Really good garnet, and this one has it too, has flashes of light inside as you turn it. It almost looks like a little light turns on. When you hold it up to the light, sometimes you can see that better. Little flashes of red light. And so our biblical ancestors believed that God's power was already manifest in garnet by virtue of the way that it sparkled and the inner lights shone. They believed it was protective and also stabilizing. And so if they were feeling if they wanted to stabilize God's energy coming through the breastplate, that was one way to do it. It also protected them as they worked in the temple, which was very important. The next stone is sapphire, and that is the 5th stone in the breastplate of Aaron, aligned to sapphire. This is a beautiful piece. It almost has a star. Do you see the star? That's that light play. This sapphire for sure is a star sapphire. How cool is that? Make sure you look at yours and see if you have that little chatoyancy or light play on it. Sapphire is a stone of inner strength, insight, intuitive awakening. It activates the 3rd eye chakra, for sure. And it was in the breastplate because God's truth and God's light equals God's wisdom. That is the consistent story throughout all of the biblical narratives. Sapphire is wisdom. The color of the sky in heaven is said to be sapphire. And so, and even today, we sometimes think about looking up at the clouds and it's like sapphire skies, in the late afternoon. And so we can see how the beauty of the kingdom of heaven would have been reflected in the beauty of sapphire to our ancestors. But they believed that it anchored God's truth and God's light in deeper wisdom. The 7th stone, am I right? 6th stone, is green lace jasper. And we know for sure that green jasper was used in the breastplate of Aaron. This is a really, really important stone. Jasper is mentioned in the Bible in multiple places. It is referred to as Yahalom in the Bible. Let me make sure that's right. Yes, the Yahalom. And the only other option, by the way, for green jasper would have been diamond. There is some confusion as to whether it was green jasper or diamond that was used in the breastplate. We think it was jasper, and so that's why we chose to go with jasper as opposed to a Herkimer diamond for your set, for example. Diamonds were accessible at the time, but they were still extremely rare, right? Mostly coming out of India, and so it would have been very difficult for our biblical ancestors to be working with diamonds. Not impossible, but it would have been challenging. Jasper brings a soothing, soft energy that restores health to the physical body. This was the healing stone, or one of them, in the breastplate of Aaron. When you work with green jasper, which is your bloodstone, it is your evergreen jasper, any of your green jaspers today, you are standing in the lineage of your ancient ancestors and what would have been engraved on the beautiful breastplate of Aaron. And then the next stone, one of the most special in the breastplate, is the Lashem, which is represented by lapis lazuli. The other options for Lashem, by the way, and there are many of them, it could have been Eliot stone, which is the national stone of Israel. It could have been chrysocolla, which also would have been accessible during biblical times. Many of us believe it was, in fact, lapis lazuli that was in the breastplate of Aaron, and that it would have represented power and wisdom. Our biblical ancestors were familiar with this stone. It had been used historically before biblical times, and so it would have been a stone that would have been well known to them. Lapis is also easy to carve. We can almost completely rule out certain stones from the breastplate, like diamond, which is almost impossible to carve. I will tell you one of the interesting little side notes about the crystals of the Bible, and in particular the crystals of the breastplate of Aaron, is that there's all kinds of legends about how it was engraved. And one of the most affirmed legends is that it was engraved magically, that there was either a material or a magical worm, a little creature, who was kept, and that little creature, all that little creature did was engrave, and could engrave anything on anything. So, as the legend goes, that little worm could have engraved on diamond, or could have engraved on corundum, which is a 9 on the measure of hardness scale, or diamond, which is a 10 on the measure of hardness scale. Extremely hard to carve into, as opposed to your stones in that 4, 5, 6 range on the Mohs scale, like quartz and carnelian and agate and sardonyx, which are much more malleable, much easier to carve. Like I said, lapis is courage, confidence, power. It may have been in the breastplate to represent God's divine power as activated through the Urim and the Thummim and his divine light and truth. And then the next stone was agate. This is the next stone in the breastplate of Aaron. Agate is powerful and gentle. It's almost like the opposite of lapis to a certain extent. Where lapis pursues power, agate pursues grace. Where lapis pursues strength and intuition, agate pursues grounding and a deep inner knowing. And so it represented Shebuw, S-H-E-B-U-W, and which also represents protective magic, opening all chakras, connecting spirit to earth. So it's an anchoring stone. It connects you to earth. It connects all of the universal energies down and roots them into Gaia. And so agate is a very important grounding stone as well as a very important protective amulet. In ancient times, agate was used extensively, partly because it was relatively accessible, partly because it was easy to engrave upon. And that, like I said, those were the primary characteristics that people looked for in crystals at the time. Okay, number 8 in the breastplate, amethyst, Aklama. There is universal agreement that Aklama is amethyst. Sending love to the siren. It brings peace, balance, and third eye awakening. In biblical times, it was thought to elevate your vibration to the level of God. Isn't that beautiful? We still use amethyst today as a crown chakra stone, but our biblical ancestors used it because they thought that it helped human consciousness raise itself to the level of the divine. And I still believe that. I still feel like when I work with amethyst that I'm working with something that taps into my own deeper essence. Do you know? It's like it gets me out of my head. It gets me even out of my heart and helps me to really connect with myself as a spiritual being. It helps me to facilitate contact with my higher self. And so that's why all of us in the metaphysical world believe that amethyst was a very important addition to the breastplate of Aaron. And what I like too is I like to think about it would have brought a really diverse pop of color too when you think about it. All of the other stones being in that sort of like the neutral palette of the greens and the whites and the creams and the reds and the oranges. And so that pop of purple would have been really beautiful in the breastplate as well. Okay, chrysolite represents Tarshish, Tarshishh. And it's a tiny crystal, but let me tell you, we had to work our tails off here at Sage Goddess to get this for you. This is the one I showed you. This is what it looks like in its raw crystal form. So you're getting a little piece of that star, which I love so much. This is optimism. This is hope. This is faith. I really wanted you to have this because I doubt that you do. So if you're a collector, you just added something super special to your collection. If you have jewelry wire wrapped or made, I would add this in. I know it's a little tiny piece, but it has a huge vibration, and size doesn't matter when it comes to crystals. And so work with this piece if you need to bring more happiness, more optimism, more joy. It also brings a spirit of generosity. It attracts generosity to you, and it brings hope. And so in the biblical sense, the belief is that this crystal was used because it represents God's ultimate charity. It represents God's ultimate benevolence and God's ultimate desire to give you all that you seek. So it's a powerful manifestation stone, powerful solar plexus crystal, and that is a special one. That was sort of the highlight of the show. It teaches us an important lesson that it isn't always size that matters most with your crystals, especially when they're rare. The next crystal is turquoise. I love turquoise so much. This is beautiful, natural turquoise. This is for balance, and this represents, in the Bible, Shoham is the tribe name. This is number 11 in the breastplate. We are pretty sure that it was turquoise. It could have been onyx or malachite. Those are the two other alternatives for Shoham. But one of the reasons that we believe turquoise was used is that it represents the balance between heaven and earth, which really in so many ways Aaron himself represented that balance, right? The high priest, think about a high priest or high priestess today. We are the intercessors, right? We go between the human and the spirit worlds in order to bring back medicine or to ask questions or to, channel healing energies or whatever work that we're doing. And so the high priest or the high priestess always lives between worlds. And the turquoise honors that truth and represents that truth and supports that truth. It brings your awareness back to center. It helps you to deepen your state of compassion and forgiveness. Turquoise is the stone of ultimate peace. I love that. In the Bible it talks about a peace that transcends human peace, the peace that only God can bring. And I think that's what turquoise represents. It's the peace that you can't get mortally. It's a peace that's only accessible in the spirit realm. And then the last crystal of the Bible, at least in terms of Aaron's breastplate, is Yashpe, which would have been jade. There's almost universal agreement that Yashpe is jade. And why jade? Strength. endurance, right? The ability to overcome obstacles, abundance, tranquility. But beyond all of those things, wisdom. The breastplate was a translator, a transmitter of God's wisdom. And nephrite jade represented that in biblical times. Today, we use jade almost more in a Chinese sense, because the Chinese sensibilities about jade as a stone of endurance and prosperity and business success has kind of trumped our ancient understanding of jade as a stone of financial and spiritual renewal and strength. And so that is more what it represents in the biblical realm. It also, like I said, represents God's inherent, innate wisdom and your own ability to receive that wisdom, to integrate that wisdom on a mental level, a physical level, a spiritual level, and an emotional level. And so nephrite jade is the last of the 12 crystals of Aaron's breastplate. And so I hope this has been a really exciting opportunity to talk more about these crystals and why they may have been used in the Bible, what their properties may have been. I had such an incredible experience delving deep into this history and this mystery to a certain extent too. I loved, even beyond learning about the crystals, I hope you enjoyed learning about the energy streams associated with the breastplate. I think it's a really exciting observation, I guess I'll say, for those of us in modern times who may have felt like our Christian faith and our upbringing separated us from metaphysics, separated us from crystals, and truly many people believe that God doesn't support, the use of metaphysical tools for divination purposes. And yet we know for sure that Aaron's breastplate was a metaphysical tool. And so questions arise about, in the Christian faith, is it okay to use crystals for metaphysical purposes if you are ordained by God for that purpose, right? So this breastplate was divinely inspired, divinely created. It was treated with such reverence, right? Protected and cared for and worn with such reverence and diligence and used in such a magical capacity. I think it's hard for many of us to even imagine what that might have looked like, or what it would have been like to stand in the presence of it as that energy came through. So I hope that this little bonus session for you helps to inspire you to go back and think about some of the old texts and the old traditions in a new way. Maybe our interpretations have been too strict, or maybe we haven't done enough diligence to really understand the histories and the mysteries associated with our spiritual traditions. I hope I'm inspiring you on that path to dig and grow and learn and try to access as much wisdom and information as you can. But I can tell you this process has brought my own spiritual development full circle and really inspired me to be grateful for my Christian roots, because it all comes together at a certain point and you realize that all paths are leading you to the same place. Aho. And so it is. Enjoy, everybody. If you haven't gotten your Crystals of the Bible yet, the set is in the shop for you. Don't forget your discount code. I'll look forward to seeing you very, very soon. Thanks so much for joining me for this session. Take care.